Hi friends, Haley here with 5 Minute Yoga. Thank you so much for joining me. Today we'll be running through a series of poses that I like to call balancing birds, which is entirely balancing on your hands and your wrists. So if you have sensitivity in the wrists, it's okay to sit this one out. So please join me seated on your mat with the hands at heart space. Take a few deep breaths to ground. And then take your hands into Lotus Mudra, spreading the fingers, keeping the wrists together. Taking the hands at a spiral, keeping the wrists touching as you run the knuckles around each other, opening up the wrist joints, really kind of getting that full range of motion. Change directions and do a few more circles. Bring the hands back to Lotus Mudra. Take one more deep breath. And slowly transition. I'm going to do a series of wrist warm-ups to really make sure we're ready for these arm balances. So, taking the fingers towards the body, forearms away, sit back on the heels, and really open up the forearms. You can do a few circles. Be gentle, don't overextend. Just really try to open up all the space you can in those joints. Release the pose, shake out the hands. This time placing the tops of the hands on the ground, fingers facing towards you or behind you. Open up the backs of the forearms. And don't put too much weight on the backs of the wrists, kind of a gentle stretch. Release the pose, shake out the hands, circle the wrists. We're going to transition into our first pose, which is crane pose. Now, if you're new to these poses, I highly recommend using a prop, a block to support the forehead so you don't fall onto your face. Any good yogi will tell you they have smashed their face many times in this pose. So take the hands about shoulder width apart in front of you. Start by standing up on the feet. And for crane pose, you want the knees to be as high up into the armpits as possible. Using a prop to find your balance, lifting up on the toes and balancing on the hands, coming back down. In crane pose, you also kind of want the arms to be as straight as possible. Our next position is crow pose. Give yourself a minute to let the wrists relax if you need to shake them out a minute. In crow pose, you tend to keep the arms bent as opposed to crane pose where they are straight. So if you need to take the block a little lower to adjust for the height difference, please do. Placing the hands on the mat. This time our knees, or just below the knees, the shins, are going to be placed lower onto the forearms, just above the elbows. Resting the legs on the arms. Stacking the body and lifting the toes to find your balance for crow. You may not be able to tell in the video, but if it weren't for this block, I would have somersaulted many times, and that's okay. Release the pose, gently shake out the hands and circle the wrists. We'll now be transitioning into side crow. So same principles as our initial crow, only this time we are keeping our knees together, twisting the body, and stacking both knees on top of one elbow. It's important to keep the core strong in this pose. The balance does come from the stacking and finding the right fulcrum, but it also comes from your core strength in a big way. Transitioning to the other side. Hands on the mat. Twisting the knees to the opposite side and stacking them on the other arm. Gently tilt forward, finding your fulcrum. Raise the toes and side crow. Clearly, these balancing poses are not my strong point, but that's okay. Release the pose. Shake out the wrists. Take a few breaths here. Kind of let yourself come back to the earth. Balancing birds can get kind of flighty. For our final pose, we'll be going into peacock pose. If you have sensitivities in the wrist, I don't recommend this one. But like our earlier stretch, you'll be taking the palms down, fingertips facing towards your knees. Bring the elbows in, balancing the chest and the rib cage on the backs of your upper arms. Try to find your fulcrum by raising the back legs. And this is a good pose to play with, not one that I'm actually very good with, and one that I probably should release right now because my wrists are a little bad. But spend as much time playing with this pose as you like. When you're ready, release it, sit back up, circle the wrists, shake out the hands. Return to a comfortable seated position. Thank you so much for joining me today for this very ambitious balancing pose. Hope you have a wonderful day. Namaste.